Boston is such a technical course. You really do need to train yourself for those ups and the downs.
Are you running a marathon? Oh my god, I could never run a marathon. You sure about that? My god, a marathon? That's like 42 kilometers, 26 miles. I don't understand those people. That used to be me.
But not anymore. Welcome to the Marathon Podcast. My name is Christian Warwick, aka Warwick Runs on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Really happy to have you here. And again, thank you so much for listening. I can't believe how many people are listening to this podcast right now. This feels kind of surreal, knowing that in March when I started this, I was just talking to myself kind of, and I had no idea that it would grow to anything like this. And I think that this is just the beginning. So thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please give this podcast a review and share it with a friend. Really appreciate that. And also keep tagging the Marathon Podcast on Instagram if you're listening to it on a run or wherever you're listening. I love when people do that, and it's a nice thing that people have actually started doing. In today's episode, we're having Tristin Colley with us. Tristin is an amazing runner. We're going to talk to her about her Boston experience, about her journey. She's going to share some of her training heading into Boston, running super fast there, and just being a very consistently good runner. She's currently pregnant, so she's kind of taking a break from racing and new PRs, but she definitely plans on using that mom strength to get back. And I'm just very excited for her to guest the Marathon Podcast. And one of the reasons why Tristin is on is because Erica Kemp told me about Tristin. She is a part of the same team as Amanda Vestry, who was on a couple of episodes back, SAP. And SAP is no longer operative, so she is now without a team. And Erica told me about this and said that maybe Tristin can benefit from getting the Marathon Podcast sponsorship. So Tristin is one of the Marathon Podcast sponsorship athletes. Really happy to support her. I am so happy whenever I hear that the athletes are grateful, that they tell me that it means a lot. And yeah, just really proud to support her. Before we dive into that episode, there are a couple of things that I want to talk about. First of all, I just want to mention again this hat that I'm actually starting to like more and more. The Marathon hat, and you can start pre-ordering it on themarathonpodcast.com if you like it. Again, everything that I make on these 300 hats will kind of just go right to the athletes, go back to them. That is kind of what the whole purpose of these hats are right now. So it's kind of a way for you to help me support the other athletes or support the athletes getting the Marathon Podcast sponsorship. Another thing, my fiance, she started making these really, really cool tote bags, some in corduroy, some in canvas, and they are kind of the perfect bags to bring with you to the track or to your training, and bring your shoes and a bottle of water or whatever small things you want to bring with you to a workout. You can check that out at everdell.design on Instagram. It is everdell.design, right? Yes, everdell.design. And you can just reach out to her if you're interested in having one. Those are really cool. I really like them. And yeah, just a little bit of an ad for my own fiance there. Other than that, I was able to run much longer than I have previously today. I was on and around with my friend Stefan. That was amazing. Really, really nice. You kind of feel like I'm back at it. I'm also excited about heading over to the US for Thanksgiving next weekend, and that will be great. Actually, running with Matt Taylor, the CEO of Tracksmith, who guested the Marathon Podcast a few months back. Really, really recommend listening to that episode. Actually, Tracksmith is an amazing brand, and I became an even bigger fan after that conversation. So yeah, back to running, really hoping that this is what it's going to look like going forward. I'm starting to doubt that I will even go to Valencia, so I'm just going to use these next weeks and months to get back to proper training shape and get back into running. So that was a short update on hats, tote bags, and training. And I think that we should just jump to the conversation with Tristin. Tristin, welcome to the Marathon Podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such a cool thing that you're doing. So we all really appreciate it.
Thank you. I think we have to establish before we start our conversation that the reason I actually learned about you and the reason that I reached out to you was that Erica Kemp, again, she's done that with a couple of athletes now. She told me about you, and then I reached out and asked you if you wanted the Marathon Podcast sponsorship, and here we are. So that is kind of how we connected, and now I'm excited to learn more about you and your running.
Yeah, I love Erica. She's such a great person, such a great competitor, and I see her at races all the time. And she ran in college with my husband, so yeah, we go way back. I would say I think we're the same year too in college, so we've done races together. And she's such a great person, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate her too. And yeah, it's again, I love this community. Here we are, getting to know each other online, and yeah, it's a cool community to be a part of. And before we dive into everything, I asked you just before we started recording about your last name, because you used to have a different last name. Now you have a I don't know if you still call it a new last name, but will you say something to the listeners who might still know you by your last name
Yeah.
and then your new one?
So it's now my middle name. So it's Tristin Colley. Yeah, and you asked me if I was Dutch, and I was like, yes, but way far removed in the past. I did run, I was saying I ran the Rotterdam Marathon in 2022. That was the first time I broke 2:30, so it was a really special day, but I felt a lot of love from the crowd because I had my last name on my bib, and I felt like people thought that maybe I was Dutch, but I mean, I am by blood, but yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. How is that for you? Because obviously, as a marathon runner or a runner in general, with a lot of races, you will have your last name on your bib. And I was thinking about it when I was scrolling through your Instagram that it must be a bit weird for you because you've always had a last name on there, and now you might have. Or are you gonna race with your middle name, or will you race with Colley?
Since I've been married, I've been racing with Collie. It is weird because I like associate that with my husband, and he's also a marathon runner. So like, it's funny if we go to the same races, we'll have like the same bib. So we have to make sure like I get the women's one and he gets the men's one. But it is weird, like cheering, like when people cheer for you and hearing Collie instead of like Van Ord, which I've heard my whole life. It's strange, but I kind of saw it as like, moving forward, like I'm not the same runner I was years ago, and it's a nice change. So
Can I ask you how that is? So my fiance and I we're getting married next spring, and
awesome,
I'm
congrats.
actually thank you, and I'm actually
Yeah.
taking her name as my middle name, and so
Oh, that's so
it
cool.
yeah, I think it's pretty cool. It's more modern, not super
Yeah.
traditional maybe, but yeah. So how is that in general to just have a new last name? Because obviously you had the previous last name forever.
Yeah, I think it's kind of weird at first. Like you have to figure out your signature, you have to change, and then all the paperwork you have to go through to do it. It's a lot. I was debating whether to do it or not, but we kind of just decided together. I was like, yeah, you know what? Why not? Like everyone in my family's done that, and I was like, I can just move my last name to my middle name. I wasn't super attached to my middle name was Marie before Van Ord, so I wasn't super attached to it. So I still identify a lot with my old last name, but just kind of like adding something else on the end. But no, I think that's really cool that you're doing that. We actually like kind of talk back and forth about that, but it's a lot of work changing your last name with the paperwork. So yeah, I feel like it's been a year since we've been married, and like still some of my stuff has my old last name on it, but it all gets figured out. So
Yeah, it was actually a funny discussion that we had because so I'm Norwegian, and here it's getting more and more common for people or for men to take their wife's name,
yeah,
and so I don't feel like maybe it's as common in the U.S. And my fiance is
yeah,
from the U.S. and then she was like, nah, I'm not sure about that. Like it seems a bit weird. And that's like, and then I was like, it's much more normal than you think. Like here, people do it all the time. And then she's like, nah, I haven't heard of any of them. And then we went to a wedding that same day and we talked to 3 couples who did that. And that
That's
was kind
so
of like,
cool.
okay, then I guess we can do that too.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're not the first person I've heard of doing that. Like, I feel like I've met I can't remember exactly who, but I've had this conversation with other people, and I think it's really cool because it's like when you're getting married, it's not just like the bride's being given away. It's like you guys are creating this union, so like sharing something is really cool.
Yeah, I think so. And her last name is Everdell, so it's pretty cool. So it's kind
That
of
is yeah, that's
yeah.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna talk running and not last names here, but
Yeah.
why don't you, before we dive into everything, present yourself and a little bit about your running journey and background?
Yeah, so I started running back in middle school to stay in shape for soccer. I was convinced I was going to be a professional soccer player, like I feel like many young girls are when they first start a sport. But I've always been that runner that's progressively like gotten better. I've made jumps, but it's definitely been more progressive and more of that like just building on mileage, building on performances. And in college I was okay. I made it to like first round NCAAs. I wasn't, all American or anything like that. Didn't get a sponsorship out of college. And then I ran my first marathon in 2 hours and 40 minutes. So back then it was 2:45 was the Olympic trials qualifying time when ran my first marathon back in like 2019, 2020, and made it to the trials. And then after that got, Pete Ray with Zap, like, noticed me and asked me to join the team, so I was partially, sponsored, and then eventually kinda worked my way up to be full-time with Zap. Then I broke 2:30 for the first time back at Rotterdam. I ran 2:29, and then my current PR, well, then I ran Houston, was the first American there in 2:27, and then ran 2:25 at Chicago in 2023. So, that's my current PR. So, still, I feel like I came off of it this past Boston more fit than I was. I ran 2:26 there, so, that's up there with, like, my best performances, but I'm still, like, waiting for that big breakthrough that I know is gonna be there, so.
Can you, when you're talking about this, and you obviously 225 very fast, and I thought about it. I don't know if it was earlier today or yesterday, because I had Amanda on last
Mhm.
a couple of
Yeah.
episodes ago, and I was just thinking about those times, and I was like, it's so fast, and I was like, if that was me, I would have been kind of flying. I would feel like this was a surreal thing that I'm actually a 225 marathoner.
Yeah.
And obviously, you were saying that you're waiting for that, I don't know, breakthrough like that. But still, do you ever reflect on how fast that is and just like how, or the level you're actually at?
Yeah, I think it's easy to, like, always look forward, right? Like, you're, like, to your next PR and you're like, "I think I can," what you think you can accomplish. But if you told me, and that's, like, such a good point, because if you told me back when I ran 2:40 that I was gonna, in a few years, run 2:25, I would have been like, "No way." Like, I remember first sitting down with my coach, and he was like, I think you're a runner that can break 2:30 one day." Like, that was, like, a conversation I had with Pete, and he was like, "I'm not gonna I don't know how far under 2:30 you can get, but, like, I think that's really doable." So, like, if I had the ability to kinda, like, look forward and know that one day I would run that, it definitely puts it into perspective because, I sit here now and I'm like, "Man, I wanna run 2:22." Like, I wanna keep, like, moving forward. But if you reflecting and, like, having gratitude for, like, where you're at is so important. So, like, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I think it's very important. I was at a dinner last night with some friends, and one of my friends, she recently did her first ever half marathon.
Mhm.
And so I asked her, "Oh, how did it go?" And she started downplaying it. And I was like, "Why are you downplaying this? Like, it doesn't matter what your time was. We kind of
Yeah.
forget because running is so popular. So people are
Right.
starting to talk about times. But just a few years ago, at least in my world, I would have been like, wow, you did a half marathon. That is amazing. I don't care what you
Yeah,
ran. Like you just did the half marathon. And so I think that
right.
it's important to sometimes just stop and be like, wow, this is good. It doesn't really matter how fast or just whatever impresses, like you said, your former you kind of or younger
Right,
you.
or even, like, family members, it's, like, people who don't know much about running, and they're like, "You ran a marathon? Like, you ran the whole thing?" I'm like, "Yeah, I ran the whole time without stopping." Like, even just, like, little things like that, like, really put it into perspective, and you're like, "Actually, that is really cool what I did."
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. So then we have established how good of a marathoner you are. You're also from North Carolina, right?
Yes, yes, born and raised here, yeah.
That is where One Tree Hill was kind of based
Yeah,
in. Like I guess
yeah,
One Tree Hill or Tree Hill is actually not a place, but that was my favorite
yeah, I
show
think it
when I grew up, or still is. So big
yeah.
fan.
Awesome. Yeah, that's more of the coastal. I think that's like takes place more near the coast where I'm like in the mountains and then I grew up like right in the middle. So kind of had the best of
Okay,
both
yeah,
worlds there.
yeah, cool. Do you get that question a lot, or have you been getting that question a lot throughout the years?
Ab- about One Tree Hill.
Yeah.
I feel like people bring it up a lot. I feel like it's kind of like a pride of North Carolina thing. Like people are like, yeah, that's where like the show takes place. But it's actually really funny. I've seen episodes, but I haven't watched it all the way through. So that will be my next like binge show, like,
Oh,
that I'll
definitely.
watch. Yeah.
Yeah, you should do that because I guess now you have a little bit more time. I don't know if you touched on that when you were presenting yourself, but it's kind of a new situation for you right now. You're still
Yeah.
obviously a runner, but there are some other things that are taking up your time and energy too.
Yeah, yeah, so I am pregnant right now. I'll be 20 weeks at the start of next week, so I'm kind of, like, halfway there, um, and it's been good. It was like a fun surprise. Like, I was supposed to run Chicago this year and, got the contracts and everything from my agent and, Zap was still a thing and everything was at this high point, and then finding out I was pregnant was like, "Oh, this is, like, a really cool thing, but also this is gonna change a lot of things." So, yeah, I've still been running through it. It's been weird the past week just because I got sick and, there's these weird aches and pains that you get too because your body is changing so much, but, first trimester I was running like 100 miles a week still. I was training with one of my teammates and, the sickness was real though, like the morning sickness and just like food aversion. So, it was hard. Like I had a couple weeks in there where I was like, all right, not running as much, but it's been good the past few weeks, just running like 70 miles a week, just doing what I can, trying not to get my heart rate up too high, like not doing any like VO2 max intervals or anything, but definitely doing long runs. It is weird because I'm gaining weight every week too, so it's like I feel like I'm slowing down when I'm still like working pretty hard. So it's definitely a weird season to be in, because I feel like, I'm not going towards PRs right now, hopefully coming back soon after birth, but, just trying to stay in shape and do what I can and listening to my body. It's been like a really good lesson in just like listening to body cues and like on days where I'm not feeling great, being like, hey, it's okay to slow down. It's okay to like hold back a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about here is super important. And I had a conversation with someone else about this just the other day about running and pregnancy. And
Yeah.
first of all, I think that to men maybe especially, but people who like I've obviously never been pregnant and I will never
Okay.
never will be, but I think that if my fiance was, then I would be like, oh, are you sure you're going out for a run? Is that smart? And to kind of read up on and learn what you can and what you cannot do. And I was very surprised and impressed by how much you actually can do, although you're pregnant,
Yeah.
also in terms of the running.
Yeah, yeah, it's really cool. I think, I talked to my doctor and I talked to a bunch of women too, like when I found out and it's if you were like doing a lot before, you can kind of try to keep the same or similar level to what you've been doing. I think they recommend you don't like, if you've been totally sedentary, don't be like, all right, I'm going to train for my first marathon while I'm pregnant, but kind of keeping that same level of activity that you've been doing and just I think the most important thing too is just like really listening to your body. And like my husband's been super supportive about it too. Like, on days, a few days ago when I was feeling sick and I was like, I'm going to try to go on a run. He's like, You don't have to worry about that. Like, just listen to your body and um, do what feels right." So I think that's like the main, measuring stick is kind of being like, what does my body feel like today? Like, am I pushing it too hard, or am I in a place where I can go out and do a long run or add some pickups in my run or something like that?
But how is it? Because as an athlete, we obviously hear a lot about the mom strength that you get after.
Yeah.
So personally, I wouldn't have been very worried about my performances after the pregnancy. But like you said, you're getting heavier, so you're probably like most of the time when we're working out, we will have progress and get better. While for
Right.
you now, for the next 20 weeks, you're probably gonna just feel worse and worse running because
Right.
you're heavier and heavier. And
Yeah.
I guess you're also not training for a specific marathon right now. How, like, when you learned that you were pregnant, how did that kind of change your focus on training and how your approach to running is in like during the pregnancy?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because, like we all know this as like athletes who have goals. It's like you're always so much of your training and like the purpose of your training is to meet these specific goals. I think it's actually been sort of a blessing because I think sometimes I forget that I run because I love it and like it's just something that I enjoy doing every day. I feel like when you're training for a specific goal, it's like you wake up in the morning and you're like, I'm doing this workout because I have this goal in the marathon and that's why I'm doing it. That's my why is to go out and get this goal. And so I think for me it's been kind of nice actually to wake up and be like, hey, I'm going on a run because I want to stay healthy and like, I do have these future goals and I'm still training, but like I'm doing it because I love doing it and it keeps me sane. So I think it's been like a good little like switch in like mental perspective and I think that's only going to make me stronger coming back like having that little break of um you know just falling in love with running again just for running and just for being out there and being outside and running with friends.
Yeah, and I love hearing that because I feel like it's also easy, maybe as an athlete, to feel like you're getting a break from running and competing that you kind of do not want. Like obviously,
Yeah.
as a male, you can compete and do whatever you want. You just have to be supportive, and it
Right,
doesn't
right.
really affect our bodies. But I would just assume that it's easy to also be like, oh no, I had this goal at like
Yeah.
whether it's like you said Chicago, but also like after. But then we see all these women coming back so much stronger, and sometimes also very quickly. What is your, or do you already have some ambitions on that of like how fast you're gonna get back to being able to compete and be at the same level?
Yeah, it's actually like the moment like when I saw the positive pregnancy test, I was like already planning my races coming back. Like, it was funny, I was texting my agent, like, he was like my agent, Josh Cox, was, like, the first person to know because he was negotiating the Chicago contract, and I was like, "I'm not gonna be able to run this," so, like, besides my mom and my husband, he was, like, the 3rd person to know that I was pregnant, um, and so, yeah, I had already been texting him, and I was like, "I think I wanna do," I was like, "I could do New York coming back." I was like, "If I'm giving birth, like, in March or April, I can be running, some shorter stuff by the summer," and then, like, sending him all the stuff, and he's like, "You can worry about growing your baby right now, and we can talk about this in, like, a few months at least." But yeah, I think coming back, my goal is I never saw being a mom as, like, something that would hinder my performance at all. I always saw it as something that would just, like, add to my life and make it more fun and make running even that much more special, as a family. And, my husband's a professional runner too, so we never wanna, like, pressure our kids to do that. But I think having goals as a parent and having, like, a greater purpose in your child is just, like, makes it so much more fulfilling, and I'm just excited to, like, have that in my life and, um, come back and hopefully, I have these big ambitious goals and I see women, like, Kira D'Amato and Sarah Vaughan who are running like their best times in their late 30s with all these kids. And I'm like, that's what I want. And that's like what I expect too. It's like you go to these races and a lot of people you don't even know are moms. Like in 2024, the New York City, when I ran New York last year, like I think the top 3 women were all had kids, and you just like sometimes you don't even think about it, but it's something that's normal. And people have kids and they come back and they have these big goals. So mine are nothing short of taking minutes off of all of my times when I come back. So
Amazing. That's great. And yeah, no, I think it's great, and I also love how people are focusing on this, because
yeah.
then it probably makes it easier for yourself, for instance, when going into the pregnancy and just knowing that, okay, it's not like this is gonna affect my results poorly. Obviously, the child is much more important than running in
Right.
anyways, but since this is a
Yeah.
running podcast and that's what we're talking about, I guess that's okay to say. But uh yeah, it seems like there are kind of a lot of changes in your life, because I know that also SAP is it shut down already,
Yes.
or yeah?
Yeah, so it's basically like we're getting paid through the end of the year. Like it's I'm doing a turkey trot on Thanksgiving, like not anything super, but I'll be wearing the Zap uniform. Like it'll be a thing for the rest of the year. But yeah, they officially announced it, closing their doors. And yeah, so 2026 is just kind of wide open right now. Yeah.
How is that? I hope it's not a triggering question, but how is that like now with, I guess that brings some uncertainty, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you have a lot of new things happening. Is that stressful at all, or are you able to just relax and focus on your training and the
Oh,
pregnancy?
it's been so stressful. Like talking to my husband, and it's no fault of, you know, Zap or like, they knew this was coming, and like we didn't necessarily know it was coming, but it's not like they cut my contract because I was pregnant or anything like that. Like Zap is my family and they've been so supportive, but just the timing of everything is kind of crazy. Like being in a position where it's like my job and my goals revolve around what my body can do, and like losing my job while I'm not able to perform at my best is scary. And I trust my agent, I trust my support system and everything that they're doing, and we still have some time before we my husband and I fully are unemployed, I guess. But yeah,
Is he also
we're
part of
just trying to
SAP?
figure it out. Do what?
Is he, or was he also part of SAP? So both of
Yes,
you.
yes. So
Okay.
my
Yeah.
husband was part of that too. So we're both going into 2026 kind of in this unknown with also having a baby in early 2026. So yeah, our plan is to be in North Carolina. We actually are moving to back to my hometown. Well, my hometown's Chapel Hill. We're moving back to Raleigh, and our intention is to still train and try to find something there. So like I said, we're, in talks with a lot of different things, but it's still really unknown. So it is unfortunate in the running world with contracts being pregnant, because it's hard to see a lot of athletes who are, there's athletes who are injured that are signing contracts, and it's like I'm still here training, but it's kind of, I feel like for companies a lot of times a red flag, like, oh, she's pregnant, so like we know she can't race until the summer. So that's been really, really stressful and just like frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I think it was Amanda saying it to me after our call. She was like, yeah, I can't
Mm.
believe she doesn't have a shoe contract. She's so good and she's such a nice person. So let's just manifest that and put it out there
Yes.
that you are ready to run fast again after the pregnancy. And yeah, I
Yes.
really
Yeah.
hope it works out.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, and it's you try not to compare, but sometimes it feels like when you're sort of in that like underdog position where it's like I'm always there at races. It's like I haven't had that race where I've been like the top American at a major, but it's like I'm always right there. Like it's like I'm with that group. Like I'm running with these women. Like I have these times that are, getting world standard times and like doing all of this, but it's like you said, it's like I'm waiting for like that one to kind of like push me over the edge. So just like being in that spot is a little bit frustrating, but it's fuel for the fire. Like I'll come back stronger. And even though the timing is wild right now, I'm really excited to meet my baby and also perform. So
But do you think that it's an advantage that both of you are professional athletes? Because I feel like as an athlete, you might be used to handling challenges in a bit of a different way. And you might, I don't know, obviously, it's not the same as a challenging competition or workout or injury or anything like that. But I just feel like you might have some benefits or advantages compared to other people. How do you look at that?
yeah, I think, resiliency is like one of the most like important values to me, and just knowing that life and things are going to be tough, but that's actually making you stronger. So, I'll get and my husband's great about reminding me about that too. It's like I'll get really down and stressed out, especially with all the pregnancy hormones about some of this stuff, like just worrying about the future and worrying about what's going to come for 2026. And he's like, hey, this time is really hard, but like this is going to make us stronger, like parents, stronger athletes, stronger people. And I think like embracing that, it's in a race. Sometimes you try to disassociate with like the pain or the discomfort, but sometimes you want to embrace it and be like, no, I'm working really hard and like I'm going through something right now, but I'm going to come back even stronger. So I do think, I think running is just such like a great metaphor for life too, like in life circumstances and things that you go through. So I do think being, especially an endurance athlete, definitely helps with going through some of the tougher stuff in life too.
Cool. That's kind of what I thought, but I'm not sure if that's the case for all athletes. But I guess it's a good test to kind of see how good you are at that, and
Right, right.
whether you're benefiting from the sports here. Maybe you'll be able to benefit also from this later on with sports, because
Yeah,
it's like, oh, this is just a race, nothing compared to
right.
that fall of 2025 or whatever.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think putting into perspective, yeah, is definitely a good thing. It's like you go through these tough things in life and it puts running into perspective too. It's you get so absorbed and like narrow-minded in a race or in your training, and sometimes you forget to like zoom out a little bit and be like, running is obviously super important. It's like one of the main things in our lives, but it's also just running. So
Yeah.
it's just running. It's just a race on one day. And I think putting that into perspective is important. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. We're gonna talk more about running specific things, but one last thing I wanna ask you about is that I read somewhere that your favorite memory from running was meeting your husband. Can you say something about how you met? And I think those like athlete love relationship stories, those are great. So I would love to hear that.
Yeah, it's so funny because I feel like I always grew up being like, I'm never gonna date a runner. Like I wanna like have that separate, and, I never really dated like runners, throughout high school or college or anything like that. So um it was meeting it. I actually met him at a race in Pittsburgh. It was the Pittsburgh half back in 20, I think it was 2018 or 2019. But I ended up eating dinner sitting next to him at a table the night before the race, and like I just remember immediately like clicking with him, and his smile was like, I was like just kind of, I don't want to say love at first sight, but I had this like feeling. I was like, okay, I think this is my person. Um and then we kind of like hung out for the first time, and after that, and I told my mom, I remember I went home and I was like, this is the guy I'm gonna marry. And she was like, don't tell him that. Like, you're gonna freak him out. And I was like, I'm not gonna tell him that. But I was like, I'm just telling you now. Like, I'm calling it. Like, this is the guy that I'm gonna get married to. So, um, yeah, I think it was just we met at a running event, but it like didn't have to do with running, I guess. It was like, I didn't fall in love with him because of the running. It's like I happened to meet him at a running event, and it was like, all right, this is like my person. So
So how did you become a couple after that? Did you kind of approach him, or how did that happen?
yeah, so I was actually running for a different club. I it was like a it was the Raleigh Distance Project, so it was more of like a developmental, like we were getting gear from Oiselle and like some travel support, but I wasn't getting paid. And I hadn't run a full marathon yet or anything. So that was kind of like when I ran my first full marathon, that was when I was like, okay, I can get like a little support for this. But yeah, so we were running for different clubs at the time. They were about like a 2.5 hour, 2.5, 3 hour drive. So we were pretty close to each other. But yeah, I think I was like the first, I don't want to say like I made the first move, but I think I like liked one of his pictures or something from Instagram that was like a little bit older, or he might have done that too. It was something like along those lines where it's like, I'm looking at you. And then we started messaging and it was actually like super convenient because he asked me to like come visit him in Boone, and Pete also like reached out and was like, "Hey, we want you to come visit Zap." So I was like, I get a boy and maybe a pro contract. Like that's a pretty good deal. So luckily everything worked out and went to go visit, ended up joining Zap. Having that as like a dream of like, I'm a professional athlete, back when I, had only run 240 in the marathon. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. So yeah, just it kind of all like worked out simultaneously. But
Awesome. Oh, that's great. I love that you said that. I feel like whenever you say I'm never gonna date a
yeah,
runner, that's when it happens. But you also said that you always said that, so that obviously means that running has also been a very big part of your life, and you've been a part of that community for a very long time.
yeah.
Can you say something about the first time you kind of fell in love with running? Do you remember that feeling?
Yeah, I actually like so I said this in the intro, but it was like I played soccer for a really long time and was really serious about it, and I feel like I would have these passions that I would get really like into one thing. So I was really really into soccer, and in one of the off seasons my friend mentioned, she was like, "Oh, do you want to like run cross country?" And I didn't know what cross country was. I was like, what is that?" Like she's like, "Oh, it's running. Like you run through grass and through the woods." And I was like, "Sure, I'll try it. Sounds fun." Um so I remember like starting cross country in middle school, and the races were only like a mile and a half. But that feeling of like getting that runner, like we talk about the runner's high, and like running hard for the first time and like feeling that feeling of like floating and just being in the zone. I like experienced that as like a middle schooler, and I was like, this kind of feels like what I'm meant to do. So it became like more of my main sport. Like the more that I started running, the more that I kind of like let soccer take the back seat a little bit. And just I fell in love with like the sport and the people. I just like clicked so much better with the cross country runners. Like I felt like it was just more me. Like soccer was such a like I love the sport, but it was also super competitive at a young age. Like, there were girls on my soccer team in middle school being like, "Oh, I'm talking to these colleges." And I was like, I don't even like, they're like, "We want to go to UNC. We're talking to this coach. We're talking to the UVA coach." And I was like, I'm not doing any of that. And with running, it just felt so much more like we're doing this because we love it. And, it's something we love being out in the woods together, just chatting on runs. And then, it's such a connecting feeling to be in a race where you're all, no matter how fast you are, you're all pushing yourselves as hard as you can. And just that camaraderie, I just fell in love with.
And then you continued running, obviously. How long
Mhm.
were you running cross country before? Because you moved on to the track first, is that right? Or
So
after that?
so I ran cross country before. Like I started with cross country, and I never ran like track in middle school or anything like that. And then in high school, I still kind of played soccer a little bit during track season my freshman year. And then I moved on to running both track and cross country in high school, and then eventually did that at Appalachian State, which is actually like where Zap is. So similar like geographic location. But yeah, I continued that into college. So cross country was like my first love, I would say. And then started doing track a little bit later in high school. Yeah.
I feel like that's what, at least when I've talked to people here And maybe that's very much, I've had mostly US runners, so maybe it's a very
Yeah.
American thing. But you start with cross country and then you move to the track, and then you get a bit older and then you move to the roads. And so
Yes.
it
Yeah.
sounds like you kind of had that very, if you can call it, normal journey to
Yeah.
the marathon.
Yeah, I think it was, like, a very, like, natural progression to that, and I think, I've always, like, been more of a like, known that, like, every time I would run a longer distance, I would get better. So, I was like, "Alright, what's the longest I can get?" So maybe trail in the future, doing ultras, but, like, the longer I run, like, usually the better, it is. So I think it was always, like, a natural progression to that, and I do remember back in high school too, I actually ran my mom's sister ran Boston in 2011, and I was still just running cross country and playing soccer at the time, but we went to go watch her, and that was, like, the coolest, like, going to a world marathon major as a high school cross country runner. I was like, "I'm doing this one day." Like, so that's why Boston was so special to me this year, like, running my first Boston because I that was also another, like, very pivotal time in my, like, journey with running because I knew in 2011 that I wanted to run marathons and, be a part of that, so that was really cool too.
Yeah, I love hearing this, and I also feel like maybe that's where you stand out from a lot of other runners, because I feel like if you look at, say, Jess McLean, who was on the, like, she's been doing great on track, took a couple of years off, and then she kind of just found the marathon. And you hear more runners being like, no, I'm staying on the track, I'm doing 5K, 10K, and
Yeah.
then something, just, I don't know, something or someone pushes them to the roads and the marathon. And it sounds like you had your eyes set on the marathon pretty early then.
Yeah, yeah, I do. I think it's a little bit I think a lot of runners try to, like, hold on to the track as long as possible and then kinda see, like, where that takes them, but I think for me, it was definitely more of, like, an immediate attraction to, like, the roads and the longer stuff. You know, I'm always I always say I'm not, like, the most talented, like, I would never be someone who's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna break 15 minutes on the track," like, in the 5K, like, I know I'm not gonna do that. Like, if you ask me if I'm gonna break 2:20 in the marathon, I'll be like, "Yeah, like, I think I can do that, but I don't think I can break 15 minutes on the track." So, I think I'm one of those athletes who's like, the more miles I put on my legs, like, sort of a workhorse a little bit, like, the better I can get at the longer stuff, but I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I can go run a 4:20 something mile or anything like that, so
I guess that was actually going to be my next question. Why do you think that, and maybe that is the answer, but why do you think that you like the road and the marathon more than you like the track?
yeah, I think it's a big part of it is, like, the obvious answer, right? It's like, I'm better at it, and it's fun to do things you're better at, you know? But at the same time, I also think it's more being such a metronome on the track and, like, having that feedback every lap, for me personally, it's a little bit, like, daunting and hard for me to get into that, like, flow state and be able to really just, like, race and compete, and I think on the roads, it's a lot easier for me to, like, get into the race and be like, I'm racing this. I'm racing this against people. I'm not just looking at the time or, counting down the laps. It's like I'm in this to push myself as hard as I can and race against other people. So, I think it's, like, a lot of a mental thing too, I've run faster on the roads in every distance than I have on the track, and it's weird because you're like, "Okay, so a flat track, you're slower in the 5K than you are on the roads," and it's like, "Yeah, but I think that's all just, mental too. It's the way you race it." So,
But what you're saying there, I find to be super interesting, or like when you talk about the racing aspect of it, because one thing that I never really thought about until starting to run marathons myself is that we have several kind of groups in the marathon. You obviously have the ones running, and like we talked about, their goal is to finish the marathon, and just running it is, it's a big deal.
yes.
And then you have people like me who like I'm chasing my PRs, and so my PR
Yeah.
is 2:47, and I just I want to run faster. But
Yes.
whenever I sign up to a race, I will compete with myself. So when I was in Boston this spring, I'm not really thinking about that person. I'm gonna beat that person. I'm thinking about how I can run as fast as possible. And then we have runners like yourself, and you are actually racing the race. So yes, it's great if you can PR, but in Boston, the most important thing is to beat whoever you like. If you could beat everyone, that would be the best, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I guess when you did your 240 marathon, then maybe it was more, I don't know if that was more time oriented, but do you feel like you can say something about the difference between just kind of aiming for that time versus actually racing in a marathon?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is a little bit different. Yeah, when I ran the 240, it was my first marathon and I had come back from injury and I really just wanted to qualify for the Olympic trials, which the time was 2:45. So that race was like and that was the first time I remember like reflecting on my race that day and being like, this is the first race that I've ever run that I wasn't like worried about who was in front of me or who was behind me. Like I was just purely trying to hit a pace and get a time to qualify for something. And I think, Chicago actually like with my PR it was a little bit like that because I went out with a pace group. And so the goal really there, I mean, the goal on that day was to run 2:24. Like that's really what I wanted. So, um, even though I competed pretty well towards the end, it was like still, and I was happy with the PR. It was like going in with that certain time that I wanted. It was a little bit disappointing. Um, so I mean, it's different. I think both ways of racing are very fulfilling and like make you can feel good about it either way, but it is different. I mean, you go into certain races with the goal of hitting a certain time, and then you go into other races being like, a course like Boston where you're like, I probably am not going to PR here. Like maybe I will if it's a super great weather day and we have like a tailwind, but yeah, I think it's just different. And I think when you get into those final moments in the race too, when it's really hard to push, you kind of have to draw on different things. So, like, for example, at Boston, I was having, like, some pretty bad, like, stomach issues, and the hills were just, like, really destroying me there at the end, and, I had, like, Des right in front of me, and I knew that some people were behind me, so using that and being like, "Just chase Des," like, just, like and then Sarah Hall was right up there. I was like, "Just chase Sarah," like, just chase these people down was a little bit more of my mentality there, and then with the PR performance I had in Chicago, it was more like, "Hey, every second counts, so, like, really, really push yourself." So I think it's just drawing whether you're drawing from inside or drawing from other people in competition, I think they're both super effective, it's just different, you have to, like, switch your brain into different modes a little bit.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. But are you still, or do you still feel like you're running your own race, if that makes sense? So like if you have a plan, because at least I remember listening to Rory talking about his Boston and how fast they were running for that
Yeah.
first part of it, and he said that he was really struggling, right? And he just had to trust that at some point they're gonna have to slow down, and they
Right.
did. But for like people like me, we're trying to just maybe negative split it because that is good. Well, for you,
Right.
if you have a goal of say being top 5 or top 10, you just
Yeah.
still have to stay with that group, even though you could potentially run faster. So I guess two questions in one is: are you able to run your own race? And also, what would you choose? Would you choose a PR or like a top 10, say in Boston?
Yeah. I think, it first of all, I'll say I would choose more top 10 at a major versus a PR, just because, like, I think the racing part is just, like, so fun for me, and, like, chasing times is super fun too, but it's like, if I had to pick, I would say top 10. But yeah, no, it's hard because sometimes you have to, like, make those game time decisions too because sometimes people will and, like, I feel like I typically make pretty good decisions in races where, especially in the marathon when it's so long, if someone pulls away at mile 10 and you can be like, "Hey, I'm actually making the decision to not go with this person and run my pace because I have faith in my training and that like I can negative split and like catch this person in 8 miles or 9 miles or whatever it is." I think I think that's really important too because you can make the game time decision to either go with the person making the move or you can be like, "Hey, no, like I'm trusting in myself that like I'm having this good day and I can stay back and then eventually kind of make a move forward." And it's hard to know when that's the right move because even in like back in Chicago in 2023, I actually did go with a move that was made at mile 17, which like now after running a few more marathons, I'm like, if you feel good at 17, like you, that doesn't mean you're gonna feel good at mile 24, you know? Even though
Or
it
mile
seems like
18.
you're, yeah, exactly. Or a mile 18. So I ended up making a move at mile 17 with Sarah Vaughn, and she ended up running I think 2:22 or 2:23 that day. But I kind of made that game time decision. I was like, I'm gonna take the risk today, and I'm gonna go with this move, and it did not pay off because I eventually got passed by a lot of people at probably around mile like 21 or 22. But I think I think yeah, it's just it's such a crazy balance of like knowing what the right move is on that day, and that's why racing is so fun and so risky because you never know. It's like I could have, if I did make that move and something had been a little bit different, then maybe I would have run, 2 minutes faster, but yeah, all you can do is like reflect and just like learn from your mistakes or I don't even see them as mistakes, but it's just like those game time decisions you make and like as you grow as an athlete, you get more and more information from like what you can handle and knowing your body and knowing what decisions to make in the moment. So
No, cool. I love hearing the reflections around that. It's really cool, and I also think that it's fun to hear that you kind of have the same. You still kind of have the same approach as I would have. It's just that you have an aspect to it that is just you know every now and then during the race will kind of show up. So you're probably running your own race, and then something happens where you have to make that decision, but that
right,
could potentially happen to all of us, right? That you have someone catching up with you and you have to make the decision, do I want to run behind this person or do I just want to let that person pass me? So no, it's
right,
fun
or
to
even
hear.
like yeah, being like, okay, I'm in this, going out with a pace group. You're like, I'm in this pace group, but I feel really good at mile like 20. Like maybe I can get like another minute off my PR if I catch up to the next person, and so it's like maybe your goal isn't like, hey, I really want to beat that person, but it's like you still have to make those game time decisions where it's like, am I gonna go with this feeling of feeling really good? It's like, do I feel really tired? Do I pull back a little bit and kind of like save my energy? So it's all like the same decision making. It's just like in different contexts. But I think it's like I think we all deal with that as runners. It's like you all of us have to go into the race and just like trust our training and trust that we're doing our best on the day and that we're going to give it our all on the day. Like that's just like what we all have in common, no matter if you're just trying to not walk during your marathon or whether you're trying to break 5 hours or something. It's like we all have that in common, just going into it, trusting your training and having to make those decisions during the race that sometimes end up going your way and sometimes don't.
And struggling the last 6 miles.
Oh yeah. I know, it's so crazy to think about because it's like in a marathon, you hit mile 20 and like part of your brain's like, I'm almost there. And then part of your brain is like, no, I have a 10K to run. It's like the
Yeah.
worst feeling in the world, I feel like, when you hit that 20-mile mark because you're so like obviously delirious and just wanting to make it to the finish line. But you kind of I feel like you at that point you just have to like take off every like K or every mile and just be like, all right, like I'm just doing this 1 kilometer at a time. Like that's all.
I feel like that last 10K is like when you're hungover and you're saying that
Yeah,
I'm never gonna drink again, and that's what you say
I know.
because of the last 10K. You will say that after the marathon, like I'm not doing this again, or why am I doing this? And then 2 days
Every
later, you're
time.
signing up for
Yeah.
a new one.
Yeah, and that's like and that's too is like something so interesting is I feel like people have this idea that like professional athletes don't ever like have the urge to drop out of a race. It's like, "Oh, they're running really fast, like, they feel great the whole time." It's like, "No, I'm really tired," and, like, I multiple times will have thoughts in my head, like, "I could just step off the course right now and, like, feel so much better," but, like, we all have to fight those thoughts, when we're pushing ourselves. So, yeah, you definitely it's definitely your, like, mile 20, you're like, why did I choose to do this? Why am I, like, out here doing this right now when I could be sleeping in my hotel room?" Like, we all get those thoughts, so
Yeah, definitely. I think that is an important thing to remember. And I think that we also tend to think that, like you said, professional athletes are the faster ones, that the faster you get, the less pain you have. But the only
yeah.
difference is that it's hurting and it's going a bit faster. So it's not,
Right,
the
right,
pain is going to be the same no matter what. And obviously in the marathon, you could argue that the pain doesn't last as long because you're competing for a shorter
right.
amount of time. So,
Right. Right. No, that's what I say too. It's like, we with Zap, like we would have camps, like adult running camps where people who were training for marathons, like of all levels, like people who are trying to just finish a marathon, but then there's also people who are, trying to break 3 hours. And they always ask us, they're like, is it easy? Like, what is it like? They ask us what it feels like. And like, th- it's painful and it's uncomfortable and it's definitely something that you have to push through, but I'm always impressed with the people who, work full-time jobs and go out and do these long runs and are like, I'm going to be running for 5 straight hours. Like to me, I'm like, that is so much more impressive running for 5 straight hours while you're just like trying to do this on the side than for us to have everything catered to us where it's like, we can take a nap every day and like get massages every week and like we have everything catered to us to perform well, whereas it's like there's people out there who have just as big and passionate of goals, but they're trying to like fit it into their busy schedules and just go out there and do something really really difficult. So I always get inspired from that too.
I agree. I usually say that the ones running marathons in like 5 to 6 hours, being on your feet for that long, I would not be able to do that. So it's kind of,
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter if I'm fit and I can run, faster than a lot of people. But I still would struggle if I had to run and also know that the ones running for 5 to 6 hours, they're also pushing themselves on the limit for the 5 to 6 hours. So
Right, right.
it's not like they're jogging. So it's kind
Right,
of
right.
to me that's more impressive than a lot of the really really fast runners.
Right, right. Even when I see like my husband's run 2:09, I'm like, "Oh, you ran like 15 minutes like shorter than I did." So like
Yeah,
I actually tried a lot harder than you.
exactly.
You know? Yeah.
You should just have him go out and run for 15 minutes after, because otherwise you actually had a longer workout than he did.
Right, right. I'm like, "Yeah, you should just keep doing that pace for another 15 minutes." Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I thought about something when I asked you about a top 10 versus a PR, because the sport that I came from, a question that we usually would ask each other, it was always like, what would you choose, a world record, or would you choose to be, an Olympic champion,
Yeah.
or a world champion? So we could do both like scenarios. So if we do the world champion and the world record first, which one would you choose?
Yeah, I would definitely say like either like an Olympic medal or a world champion just because like you have that forever, right?
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
something that I feel like when you get a record, it's like it's always on the chopping block. It's always like someone is going to come break that. But like if you win a championship, it's like that's yours forever.
Hmm.
So that yeah. Yeah,
No,
I would say that. I
I
mean, either one would be like amazing, but
Yeah, I would, I think I would have chosen the same thing myself. But then I was
yeah.
just thinking about it, that the marathon world records, at least historically, they've been standing for so long. But obviously you don't
Yeah.
know if that would be the case if you have one. But if it's, I had Ingrid Christiansen on and she had the world record for 13 years or something like that. And
Yeah.
then in that case, I'd be like, yeah, what would be cool is to know that for 13 years, no one was able to run faster than me. That is also
That
a cool
is
thing to
true.
say.
Yeah, because then especially, like, if you win a major or, like, the Olympics, it's like you're replaced every few years, right? It's like
Yeah.
you're only the champion for a year, you're only the champion for that. Yeah, no, that would be cool too. I'll
Hmm.
say both. It'd be great
Yeah.
to have
Yeah.
both.
Yeah. Let's just go for both.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask you a bit more about Boston, especially since
Yeah.
you said that that was where in 2011 you went there. Was your aunt
Mhm.
a professional, or did she run it just for fun? Or I don't know if you can say
No,
for
she ran.
fun, but you know what I
Yeah, yeah,
mean?
yeah. Exactly. No, she ran it. It was just like for fun, and she yeah, I mean she was pretty like I want to say she ran. I don't think she broke 3 hours, but she was, like, around the like, she was still training pretty hard for it. But, in my eyes as a high schooler, I'm like, "You're running 26 miles, I don't care how fast it is, like, that's
Exactly.
crazy." So yeah, she ran she was just doing it for fun, and we all went up as a family to support her. So, yeah, it was actually really and, like, I guess I'll say this, I didn't know this was bad, and obviously this would not fly now with, like, all the security and everything, but I actually jumped in and ran a little bit with her,
That's
for the last
amazing.
few miles, so I technically did run Boston as a high schooler, like, part of the course, um, but, yeah, back in 2011, I guess that was, like I mean, it was probably still I'm sure it was frowned upon, and I didn't know that it was this horrible thing, like banditing a race, but I jumped in there and ran with her for a few miles, so, um, yeah.
Well, we'll not tell BAA about that. Maybe they'll ban you forever because of that.
Yeah, I think they might know. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think MK probably I think I've told her that before, so hopefully they'll still welcome me back, but just know that I didn't know it was like a bad thing at the time. I kind of saw her and I was like had my running shoes on and I was like I'm just going to go for a run with her. So, yeah, but it was inspiring, but now I know it's please nobody else repeat that. Not that you could anymore. Like the
No, I
security
don't think
measures
you.
are really good now, so but
Yeah. Well, the reason I'm asking is that I know that although your marathon block is probably a bit shorter than a lot of people, but I see that a lot of people have already started, you know, training for Boston. They got their applications approved, or they got in a couple of months ago, and but at least a lot of people say, and I guess I do agree that you should train a little bit differently for Boston
yes.
because of the hills, the downhill sections, but also the hills that you're facing around 16 miles, right? So for you, and I would say that you did very well. Your PR is 225. You ran a 226 in Boston, and at least I would argue that that might have been a better performance than your Chicago
Yeah, I
Marathon.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So for you, if you were to kind of take us through that marathon block, how you prepared, but also maybe when you get to that point of like, is there anything looking back that you wish that you did more of or less of in the preparations for Boston?
Yeah, I think, one of the main things that we did that my coaches were really good about was training, like, not just the uphill, but the downhill. It's like, I think going into Boston, all of us love running down like, any runner loves running downhill, right? It's like, it's faster, but you really that first half is so downhill, like, so net downhill that it really, like, does destroy your quads and, puts a lot of, like, pounding on your legs. So I think training downhills and doing especially in the weight room or something, doing stuff with we did a lot of, like, different, like, stuff to help strengthen our quads and hamstrings just to prepare our muscles for that. I think one of the main things too that's really, really good if I mean, we were able to do that. We traveled to the course and actually like ran most of the course just to get a little bit of a course preview. But if you're not able to do that, even just going out and like finding a similar elevation profile where you can get like a really long net downhill stretch and just kind of like beat your quads up a little bit. And then coming off of that, doing like maybe a fartlek or something on some up and downs just to get your legs used to it is super helpful because yeah, that course just like it really does beat your legs up a lot. And then you kind of have to go from that cruising downhill to then being on these big uphills through the Newton Hills. So I think just doing sort of like some sort of simulation of the course. Either whether that means getting out there and running it, which I know a lot of people who live near Boston are like in the few weeks before everyone's out there running the course. I think that's super helpful. But But yeah, I think just preparing for that in a different way. It's like on a course like Chicago or a flatter course like, Houston, Chicago, you can you can just make sure you're getting your long runs in and you don't have to worry so much about that. But Boston is such a technical course. You really do need to train yourself for those ups and the downs. Yeah.
Yeah, because what would you say that if we think about the first, is it first 5 miles where it's so much net downhill and then it starts
Yeah.
flattening out? So I think that to a lot of people, like you said, runners, we love to run downhill. And
Yeah.
until you've actually done a course like Boston, you might be a bit, I don't know, I was at least a bit arrogant about it. And I was like, well, downhill is kind of, I'm going to be good at that. That's not going to really be a
Right, right.
problem. I come from speed skating, I've been doing a lot of strength training throughout my life. That is not my problem. That's not where I'm going to suffer.
Right.
And then
Right.
I obviously went out a bit too fast. And then, so after 5 to 6 miles, I started actually struggling. And it
Yeah.
was not that I was like breathing heavily or anything like that. It was more that my legs were they just felt heavy, and also not
Yes.
with lactate. It was just heavy, like it was hard.
Yeah.
And so for people who are, preparing for Boston, and in terms of their mindset going into that, uh, what would you say to people who are, running Boston for the first time, or maybe doing it for the second time but haven't really solved that one yet?
Yeah, I would say take advantage of the downhills, but don't like use it as like I think it's easy to go out and like kind of panic a little bit and be like, "Hey, like I have 5 miles downhill. I need to run these as fast as possible to like bank time and take time off so that when I'm struggling later, I can kind of like know that I ran that really fast." But I think when you do that, you kind of take for granted how much you're actually pushing when you're going downhill too. So I would say like take advantage of it in that you're pacing yourself and you're like kind of gauging your effort there, and it's going to be a little bit faster. Like going through the halfway point, it's hard. It's really hard to negative split Boston. Like I went through the first half in like 111, which means I positive split by a lot coming up the hills. But I think I was smart in that I was knew looking down at my watch and looking at the splits. I was like, okay, this is fast, and I'm not going to freak out that this is a little bit fast and like waste more energy like leaning back or conserving it, but I'm also not going to be like pushing these downhills. So I think it's definitely a difficult balance of like knowing that it's going to be faster and knowing that you're probably going to add some time in the back half of the course, but trusting in your training and just like holding back just a little bit so that you're not just like barreling down the hills and destroying your body.
Yeah, and I also think, and I'm curious about this or your take on this, because yes, so I also ran Boston this spring, and there were a couple of things that really surprised me. One was, yes, it's downhill in the beginning, but it's also quite a lot of rolling hills. So
Yeah,
when I drove through it a few days before, I was so glad that we did, because then I realized that, oh, it's actually not straight downhill. Because I think
right,
that when people talk about it, you get at least I got a feeling that it was kind of just constant downhill. And I'm
right.
sure in some ways that is good, but also just know that you're going to have some hills that you're running up actually also during the first five
Right. I
miles.
think that's important to remember too, because I feel like looking back, you can like look at your splits or just like remember what you did and be like, oh, it was straight downhill for, 5 or 6 miles and then for the whole first half. But like I that's why I think a course preview is important too, or even if you can't do that, just like looking at an elevation profile because you are gonna get some hills in there. And like even though it's net downhill and like your time will show that, like when you take splits on your watch, but it's definitely you can't just be like, oh, I'm gonna be cruising downhill the whole time. Like you definitely have, little rollers in the first one. And then I think something that helped me too was like overestimating the hills in the second part, like the Newton Hills. Everyone talks about it and being like, they're going to be tough, they're going to be really rough. And I think expecting that going in actually helped me a little bit because it made the hills. I was like, oh, this is like as bad as I thought,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Just knowing that there's gonna be hills, but also overplaying it a little bit and knowing that like you're gonna have to really push, because you are, and it is tough, but I think sometimes having that over expectation is good going in because then it seems a little less worse in the moment.
Yeah, I actually think that I have to work on that for next year's Boston, because this year I had the exact same feeling as you're
Yeah,
describing.
yeah,
I really was like, it's gonna suck. It's gonna be so hard. I'm gonna struggle
yeah.
so much. And then I got there and I was like, oh, that was it.
And now
I
you're
up
gonna go in next year and be like, "Oh, it was
yeah,
easy," and
and
you're
like
gonna be on the hill like, "No, this
I
is
should
not
not
easy."
do that. I should not do that. So I
Yeah,
guess like that was one thing that I also was surprised by, how easy they were. But obviously it depends on how fast you run them. I feel like what I did well in that, like when I got to the hills, is that I had decided I'm gonna just run by effort, and I'm not gonna try
right.
to gain anything there. I'm gonna just relax when I get up to the top of each hill, and then try to relax when I'm running down on the other side of the hill. But what I wish that I did was obviously what we talked about before about the first downhill sections, because you can actually gain so much between that and the hills because it's so flat. I was
Right,
so
right.
surprised by how much of the course is actually super flat from
Yeah,
5 miles and up until 16 miles. And then obviously
right,
after
right.
21, you start going down again. But I feel like it's not, maybe not, people are not talking enough about how much you actually can gain between 5 and 16 miles if you just
Yeah.
make sure you have some, or don't go too fast in the first 5 miles.
Yeah, no, I think that too. It's like I actually think flat is probably better for banking time and kind of like really getting into a pace than the downhill is because the flat doesn't beat your legs up as much and you can really get into that rhythm whereas like the downhill you do have to be like cognizant of like not pushing too hard because yeah your aerobic system is feeling great on the downhill but your legs are really going to take a beating on that. So yeah, I think especially like even going through half, like you might surprise yourself. And I would say too, like not to freak out if you see a split where you're like, whoa, that was way too fast. It's like as long as you were gauging your effort and you weren't all over the place with your paces, I think that's like probably like a really good place to be is a little bit quicker than you think you're gonna be because yeah, definitely coming up those hills towards the end is gonna add a little bit of I mean, regardless of how much energy you have left, you're just gonna be slower, so
Yeah, it's like we said, after 20, 21 miles, you're gonna suffer no matter what. So it's
right,
nice if
exactly.
you
Yeah.
don't overdo it in those hills. But yeah, I'm curious to hear about your that training block, because you did mention that you did some things different, but do you also feel like the rest of the training as a whole, if you look at kind of a standard marathon block, I know that a lot of people do it in different ways, but still like a standard marathon block kind of with the long runs and the workouts, did the workouts or the long runs look different than what you usually would do when heading into Boston?
I think the mileage was very similar, like, I did around the same mileage I did before Chicago, the distance of the long runs was very similar. I think really the main difference was just the, like, topography of where we, like, chose where to go, because Chicago is a lot of, like you kind of have to practice, like, being on the flat because that can be detrimental too, right? It's like, if your form is you're doing the same thing over and over again, that can beat you up a little bit too. So, you know, during the Chicago build, we would go out to this road called Todd Railroad Grade Road, which is a flat, long road where you can run 20 miles flat. And it was a lot of just like beating up your legs on the flat. Whereas Boston, it was like we would do the same workout, like maybe the same type of pickups, the same duration of the run, but we would go somewhere that was like a little bit more similar to the topography of Boston. So I think it looked the same in that it was like, if you looked at a Strava where it was just like having your weekly mileage counted and your long runs, it would look really similar. But if you really took the time to look at like the topography and kind of, you know, where we chose to do the runs, it looked different.
And then you mentioned obviously that you had some downhill training, or that you made
Mhm.
sure that you had that. But how much did you add in terms of just hills, running uphill? Did you have a lot of that as well?
Yeah, we did quite a bit of climbing too. Our coach likes to do we have this one climb that is about I don't wanna get the grade wrong, but I think it goes around, like, 2 to 3% uphill grade, and it goes for about 3 miles, so, like, we will especially towards the beginning of, like, a block, we'll do a lot of, like, strength of just climbing, and that's also an interesting thing to do too because, like, runners of any level, a lot of times you wanna, like, practice what pace you're gonna run, and you're like, "Okay, I'm gonna run this pace in the marathon, so, like, I wanna practice at this pace." But I think it's also really helpful to switch it up and be like, hey, I might be running 2 minutes slower per mile than I would if I was on the flat, but, like, I'm still getting my heart rate up and, like, training my muscles and doing this, like, hard endurance strength going uphill, I think is really important too. So we would do a lot of that, just climbing, and then, we would climb up to it's in the park, it's to, like, this, old manor house they have up on top of a mountain, and we would do 2.5 to 3 miles up climbing, and you can't look at your watch. Sometimes you're running, 8-minute mile pace, sometimes you're running 6-minute mile pace. It's just, you can never really look at time for that, but just gauge your effort and then run hard downhill too. So I think practicing running hard up and running hard down, and especially doing like longer climbs too, is really, really helpful to like strengthen those muscles and just get a lot of strength in too.
But did you then focus on doing that later, say in a long run or something? Because that I feel like you said, the hills of Boston, they're and I mean that they're not that bad. But the problem is
Yeah,
that they're bad because of where they're placed on the
where
course,
they're
right?
placed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so no, we did do a lot of, like, at the end of long runs, like, trying to do pickups, so it would be like, we're going out and doing a 20 to 23 mile long run on, one of these rolling hill roads that we have out in the country here, and it's like, "Hey, we're gonna, like, pound your legs a little bit, and then in the final, towards the end of the run, like, we're gonna throw in some, like, hard surges," whatever pace that is, pushing yourself for 1 or 2 minutes up a hill and then taking a little break, and then pushing yourself for 2 minutes up a hill and then taking a little break. I think adding that to the end of the long runs was really helpful too.
And then you mentioned heart rate, because I feel like you said, maybe with Boston and because of the hills, the heart rate might be a bit more, crucial to knowing where
Yeah,
you're at and knowing where you will break if you kind of pass that heart rate or whatever.
right, right.
So did you actually use heart rate more in your training, or do you already use that a lot? How do you approach it in terms of intensity?
Yeah, so we actually don't my coach doesn't, like, prescribe heart rate, like, he doesn't really look at that, his is more like effort, so he's like, your perceived effort that you're giving, on the uphills is, like, more important than the pace, so I think for me, it's helpful to have, like I use, like, the strap, the Coro strap on my arm just to kinda, like, every once in a while glance down and be like, "All right, like, my heart rate's 180 right now, like, maybe I need to back up a little bit." But I think I use it as that, like, sort of just a little bit of a check-in, but honestly, effort is, like, mostly what we use, like, and what my coach uses to kind of gauge what we're doing on the uphills. And he's really great too, like, we're lucky that he's in person because he can watch us doing this, and he's like, "Hey, you looked really strong on the uphill, so, like, let's try to keep whatever effort and pace that was," versus if he can tell we're really struggling, he's like, "Hey, let's pull it back a little bit." So, I think heart rate, like, training is super can be super helpful, but I think in my opinion, effort is in kinda checking in with your body and checking in with yourself is more helpful. Yeah.
So can I ask why? Because I hear this a lot, and I think that it all makes sense. I come from a sport where we just religiously, or I used the heart rate strap all the time, and
Yeah.
it was kind of just, and it works for me. But I also see so many runners using the heart rate strap. But if I ask them how much they use heart rate in their training, it's like, no, not really. It's just by feel. Is that more for logging after just to see, or Why is it that you're using it?
Yeah, so I like to have it, and it's been especially helpful with like over the pregnancy, just like making sure that I'm not pushing too hard, or seeing like when my heart rate's spiking. And like for me, it's in the moment, kind of like glancing down and being like, hey, I need to like pull back a little bit, or like, maybe I'm feeling a little weaker today, but like, my heart rate's only like 150, so I can actually push a little bit harder. I just like having it there as like a safety thing a little bit. And then it is really helpful to have the data after, to be able to have like your watch, and like to have Strava and the apps be like, hey, your heart rate was this during this. So actually these are your like predicted time. And I don't put too much thought into the predicted times, but it can help a little bit to know like, was this a productive workout? Like was I in the right zones, or was I pushing a little bit too hard? I think having it is like more of a check-in rather than like religiously being like I have to hit these numbers, is really helpful.
Okay, thanks. Now, I find this very fascinating, especially with the heart rate, because I'm kind of trying to train myself to not be too obsessed with the heart rate
Yeah,
now. And obviously, I know when I'm going too hard on an easy run because I can feel
right.
it. But it's always just been there as a tool, and it's so easy to just get addicted to having it
Right.
there.
I was gonna say that's interesting coming from a place where like that is your main marker of like what you're doing, to being in a sport where it's like, like if
Yeah,
you feel good, you can push harder. Like maybe like, it's so like it's so some of the sport is so unscientific. Like some of it is, you can do like lactate testing and all these like VO2 max testing, but then so much of our sport is also like, do you feel good? I mean, go for it.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's hard
exactly.
being from a place where you have this like, this metric that you can follow exactly. And then, a lot of coaches, and I would say like probably most professional coaches are more on the side of like, hey, let's talk about effort versus, all these exact heart rate numbers that you're getting. So
Yeah. No, and I think was it Amanda who said, and it was probably Pete, then your coach. Your coach is he still your coach, Pete? Or
yes, right
yeah,
now. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So we're still with figuring stuff out for 2026, but yeah, he's
Mm-hmm.
still coaching us.
Because I wonder if it was Amanda saying that he said something about uh, that running is art. It's science, but it's also art. And I think that is a great way to look at it. That, like you said, yes, it's nice to use the science, but you also need to use the feelings, and it's not just science based. Because I think the day that it becomes completely science based, then it's gonna be harder to perform.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's like a good like I think the science is so helpful to have as like tools. But then at the end of the day, it's like, you have certain people who like I read Lauren Fleshman's book, and like she talked about how her VO when she did a VO2 max test, like it was not like that good. Like they were like, "Oh, you'll never be, having these numbers." They were like, "You'll never run this, or you'll never run that." And she like basically overcame those numbers because of whatever reason, like her mental strength, or like whatever she was doing kind of overcame that, I guess. So I think you can have these numbers and use them as tools, but I think using them as like, the end all be all of like what you're capable of, is that's when it gets a little bit dangerous, when you limit yourself because of the tools.
Yep.
When you can use heart rate and lactate testing and VO2 max tests like to your when you can use them to get better, that's great, but you also can't look at them and let it limit you either. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like what you said about the race predictions, right? Like if your
Yeah.
Coros is telling you that, oh, you're good for a 228, and you're
Yeah.
actually good for a 222, it's kind of
Right.
just, it probably will just mess with your head if it says on
Yeah.
race day 228, and you're like, what? I thought I was in 222 shape, you know?
Right, right, and I feel like that's, both ways. It's, like, disproven it so many times. Like, I've had my Koros tell me I was gonna run 240 and then ran, 220 something. So, it's just, like, sometimes it's you just kinda have to find the balance, and then I've also had, like I think my Koros told me, last week that I could run a 226, and I was like, "Yeah, I almost, like, 20 weeks pregnant. I'm not running that." So, you kinda have to use it as, like, a again, like, a tool, Like that's not going to be 100%, but it's definitely helpful to have that. So I think having all of the cool gadgets is great, and I think it can really like enhance your running. But I think when it gets to the point where it's limiting it or like kind of putting you into that weird headspace where, you know, it's lessening your confidence, I think that's when you kind of need to like check in and be like, all right, let's do this based off of effort, or like let's take the watch off today, or let's take the heart rate monitor off and just go out and have fun. So
No, I totally agree. I think that there are great advantages to the gear and the tech that we have, but it can definitely
yeah,
just limit us too. I think it's so funny when you see these reels of going out for a run in 2001 or something, and you see people are like, hey, you want to go for a run? Sure, yeah. And then you just grab their shoes, and then
right,
2025, and then you just make sure you have everything with you of all the
right.
gadgets
It's
and
like
all the gear.
all the gadgets. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like sometimes you just have to have those runs where you're like, put the cotton t-shirt on, grab the pair of running shoes and just kind of like go out and yeah, have fun. And I think that like circling back, it's like that's what pregnancy's been a little bit, sort of a refresher. It's like, I still have these big goals, but at the same time I'm like, you know what? My goal today is to go out and just like run for an hour and like enjoy my time outside, because like that's why we all do it in the first place. It's like
Hmm.
we do it because we enjoy it. So,
Yeah, that's amazing. It's a great way to look at it, and maybe we all need kind of a break to realize that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think running breaks are, yeah, even when you're like, you always have these goals, but taking little breaks here and there, whether, you're gonna have to take breaks, whether that's a forced break when you get injured or whether that's like chosen. I would always pick the chosen break,
Yep.
whether that, a week or two, it's not a huge thing, but
Not
just
eight
kind of taking a
weeks.
little break and resetting. Yeah.
Yeah. um, we're gonna wrap this up very soon. I just wanna just to kind of finish that Boston build or the Boston
Mhm.
block. Uh, so two questions before we wrap this all up, and that is one, the workouts that you had. So you talked about the long run and what that looked like, and then I assume that you fill this in with a lot of easy running somewhere, and then you probably had a workout or two. What did the workouts usually look like during that build?
Yeah, so a lot of our coach is really big on most of our long runs. Well, like some of our long runs just like time on feet, like easier mileage, but a lot of our long runs really focus on having stuff mixed in there that's at marathon pace or even a little bit faster. So our coach really likes to do is like just have like fartlek pickups during a long run. So he's like, yeah, we're gonna go out and run 23 miles. The first 45 minutes is just gonna be kind of like to ease into it. And then he'll give us some like crazy random like number of pickups. He'll be like 7 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 6 minutes on, 4 minutes off, 3 minutes. Like it's something you have to write on your hand, but just like switching that pace up and getting used to like clearing out some of the junk in your legs and switching paces up was super, super helpful. So a lot of times it was pickups um, in long runs, or sometimes we'll do long runs where it's like, we'll run 4K hard and then jog, and then another 4K hard and then kind of jog in between. And sometimes we'll have little breaks in there where we'll switch out shoes. We'll do half of it in trainers and then switch to our racing flats. And get some fuel while we're doing that or whatever. But yeah, we would do 10-day blocks. So we would have a long run every 10 days and then easy runs with stride, some days with strides after the run in between. And then a lot of the workouts would be, some days we would have like a bunch of 1K repeats, or even, another run that was maybe not as long, but having some pickups within like a 12-mile run or something like that. So yeah, it was a good mix. The long runs usually would be, just a straight long run with pickups in it where we're not stopping, but then the other workout days would be more intervals where we would have like a full rest in between. We would do 2K, 1K, 1K and like repeat that set 4 or 5 times just to get rhythm and have a full rest in between. So,
Yeah, cool. And then the last question, this you mentioned that you had some strength training to kind of
Mhm.
build the quads. What kind of exercises did you do? And did you lift
Yeah,
very
we did a
heavy?
lot. Yeah, so we would do like some body weight, some weight, like we would use the we would either use barbells or dumbbells and do like we had a lot of like lunges, walking lunges. We would do squats, deadlifts. There were a couple where we would just do body weight, more like pistol squats, where we would put like a lot of like a slow down, just to kind of like load the quads up a little bit. So yeah, we would definitely add heavier weights, but like gradually get into that. So I think it actually is important to, a lot of times I feel like it's like the old school thinking is like, oh, runners don't need to do weights. Like you can just do core or whatever. I think adding weights is like really, really important, especially for like bone density and like loading up the muscles so that, especially on a hillier course, you can really have that like leg strength to make it up the hills.
Cool. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing all of this with, I think that for the listeners, it's going to be great to hear that about Boston. Because I feel like
Yeah.
the way you talked about this, it kind of, I think it will make them feel like, oh, so I don't have to make that big of changes, but I do need to make some changes. And I think that
Right,
is
right.
the most important message, maybe.
Right. It's like if you're ready to run a marathon, you're ready. So don't put too much thought into it, make sure you're getting your long runs in, but at the same time you do want to cater a little bit and just be prepared. Like definitely just be on that safer side where you're prepared for the downhills and then prepared for the late uphills. I think is super important. So,
Yeah, and make sure you're not fueling at the bottom of those hills. It's not nice to not have to fuel. I think like
yes.
I would almost say that if you're able to not, I guess you have to fuel between 16 and 21 sometime in between there, but it still is. I've made the mistake of fueling and when running uphill sometimes or climbing, and that's not very smart.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say yeah, definitely timing the fueling too. I think I had some stomach issues late. So
Yeah.
that's something I can definitely improve on for the next Boston, but for sure.
Mhm. No, thank you so much, and thank you for the conversation. We talked for almost an hour and a half. I've loved talking to you, and it's been time
Yeah.
flies, and probably could have talked for much longer, but we have to end it here. And I do understand now why Erica was saying that I should sponsor you through the Marathon Podcast sponsorship. I'm
Oh, that's so sweet. And
so
we're
happy. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. I think, having these other modes of like sponsorship that's not just a shoe sponsor or a nutrition sponsor, it's so cool to yeah, be a part of what you're doing. So I appreciate it.
Amazing, and good luck with everything, and hope to see you at a marathon soon.
Yeah, see you soon.
I can't believe how right Erica was when she told me that Tristin was an amazing person and an amazing athlete. I am so grateful to Tristin for guesting the pod. Really, really proud to support her. I I feel like when I started out with this Marathon Podcast sponsorship, honestly, it was meant kind of like a combination of sponsorship that could be very good for marketing and then also kind of help the athletes. Obviously, the first thought came from, or the initial idea came from wanting to support athletes, and then I was like, okay, maybe I can use this to my advantage, to the Marathon Podcast advantage. But now, after a month, I'm starting to realize that it might not have that big of an impact in terms of marketing the podcast, but seeing these reactions, it's just amazing. I had I surprised who is a part of New York the Bronx Burners last week, thanks to Rob Dalto, and that was amazing. I think that doing that just brings me so much joy and happiness, and I honestly mean that. And my dad, he had a nonprofit organization, and I always felt like maybe I should do something like it, and maybe this is my way of contributing in one way or another. Although it might not be huge, it still seems to be something that the athletes and the runners are really appreciating. So yeah, thank you again for listening to the Marathon Podcast. We are not stopping here. It's gonna be a lot of fun going forward. I have a lot of guests that I've already recorded with, and a lot of guests that I'm excited for you guys to hear more about. So just stay tuned, follow the podcast wherever you follow it so you get a notification when a new episode is out, and Enjoy your runs, and thank you so much for being here. You listen to the Marathon Podcast, brought to you by Wall Studio.